Hello, everybody. Welcome to CripChat, your weekly podcast for everything disability. Today, I have with me my co-hosts, Jonathan Shar, Ibby D, and myself, David D, and our host, Cunningham. Talking to
Keep going, David.
talking to Stella Young, talking to Sarah Barton about the Stella Young tribute statue. Please like and share. If you got any questions or any comments or any topics you want to speak about, please put them in the comments. Over to you, Cunningham.
Thank you very much for that, David. Great introduction there. And look, welcome to the show, everyone. And of course, welcome to our guest, Sarah. And before we go to you, Sarah, I just want to mention something if we possibly could. This episode today is in relation to Stella Young. Now, Stella Young was actually born in 1982, and she actually had disabilities, and basically she lived a long and actually active life. And basically, this episode podcast is to actually pay tribute to her and her statue, and also to her legacy and work, and to acknowledge the work of all advocates in our disability community who do terrific work and produce lots of great efforts and actually strive every day to deliver great results for all of us. So with that being said, Sarah, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Very happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Huge welcome to CripChat Australia to you, because you're one of our stellar guests, if we could use that pun there slightly if we could. Sarah, you're involved in a lot of works and, of course, involved in the statue. So we'll get that across the questions. But look, my first question to you is to actually ask you to tell us a bit about yourself. So away you go.
Yeah, so I'm a filmmaker, and I've been making films with the disability community about disability for nearly 30 years. So I don't know whether anyone listening or there today is old enough to remember my first film, which was Untold Desires, a film about sex and disability that screened on SBS back in 1995, and in fact won the first Logie Award ever for SBS, which seems kind of amazing. So I go way back to that. So Untold Desires was my first film, and I just thought I would make one film about disability and then I would move on to making films about other kinds of things. But in 1999, my daughter, who coincidentally, it's purely coincidence, is also called Stella. She was she had a difficult birth, and so was subsequently diagnosed with cerebral palsy. So aside from her own experience, that threw me as a parent way back into the disability community. And I kind of thought, well, it's a sign, I better make some more stuff. So a few years later, I started No Limits, which people might remember was on Channel 31, ran for a long, long time. So I was the kind of creator and founding series producer of that series. And then in 2017, I completed a feature documentary called Defiant Lives, which is a history of disability rights, the disability rights movements based in Australia, the US and the UK. So I've basically spent my whole filmmaking career making films about disability rights and advancing the kind of rights and inclusion of disabled people. Not being a disabled person myself, but of course, my daughter now is 23, and she's, got her own journey. But in the course of making No Limits, of course, Stella Young was one of our first presenters on the show, and she became a really close friend of mine and a close friend of our family. So now that she is very sadly no longer with us, I feel like it's very important that the wider world understands Stella and her work, and who she was. I don't want her to be forgotten, and I don't think she would want to be forgotten. So that's why I've been involved in, firstly, in helping with the statue, and also I'm getting started on a documentary about Stella and her life and work. So that's a long answer, but I've got time. So it tells you a little bit about me.
Amazing. That's really fantastic. Like, and so again, tell us just how you and Stella actually met.
Well,
what was that
it-
like?
yeah. So when we were casting for No Limits, someone had told me that Carolyn Bojic would be a great presenter, and she's now the chief executive director of Arts Access, and so I was chasing her down. But unfortunately for me, she was about to get on a plane and move to England. She ended up living in England and Scotland for, I think, more than a decade. But so Carolyn was literally about to get on the plane, and she said, "No, you don't need me. The person you need is Stella, Stella Young. She's who you need." But I don't think she gave me her contact details, because it did take me quite a lot of time to track her down. I really probably should have asked Caroline for the details, but it took me quite a few months to track her down, because she was in fact still living and working at Deakin University when I was looking for her, and it was like she was never in Melbourne. It's like, where is this woman? I didn't know she came from Stawell. I didn't know she was studying at Deakin, but I was told that I needed her for the show, and of course, the first time I met her, she came in and we talked about the show, and it was immediately obvious that she was going to be a fantastic presenter. But I should add that she was only 20 at the time. So she was very young, but she already had, the makings of a
A
star.
lot of flair and passion, right?
Well, she did. She was very articulate. She was a great talker, and she was great company. She was just funny and kind of sharp and witty and sassy and, all of that.
Like I mean, when it came to like Stella's advocacy, what did you know of her work before that time that you
Well,
knew?
I didn't know anything. And as a 20-year-old, she had done advocacy. She'd certainly done some advocacy at school and in Stawell, but she was just a little baby advocate at that time. And so she was really just getting started, and particularly just getting started in Melbourne. So and it's funny when you look back, because there was a whole lot of stuff I didn't really know about her. I just met her. I didn't want to kind of dig too deep. It was just like, she was a uni student. She was finishing off uni. She was going to move to Melbourne the next year, so that was going to work well for us and our show. And I just thought she was kind of cool. But yeah, I did. So at the time, I really didn't know much about what she'd done, but she quickly proved that she was, a bit of a force to be reckoned with in terms of her talent on screen.
So would you call her style provocative at all, Sarah?
I would, and I think as she grew older, she grew more confident and more provocative. So I think, at 20, yes, you can be provocative in a way that's kind of young and punk and all of that sort of thing. But I think as she grew older, she grew smarter and wiser, and her provocations were much sharper and much more well focused.
Yeah, guys, any questions?
Oh, someone's just turned my lights off. Oh no, they've gone back on again.
Let's open to the game.
Yeah, look, I really admire Stella Young's work, and all her talks she's done that I find quite, I guess, it's helped motivate me in the work that I do. So, such an amazing woman Stella was.
I think one of the things that made her unique was she used humor. And I think, in disability, sometimes there's not a lot of humor, because sometimes there's actually just a lot of drama, because life can be tricky, when you're trying to advocate for what you need, and that sort of thing. But Stella was able to often tell hilarious stories about actually really crap things that happened to her.
Yeah.
Sarah, do you see that some people, when they use humor, they like to be careful with humor and disability, because some people can take it the wrong way?
Look, I think when disabled people use humor, I think that's perfectly acceptable. I think, you know, one of the rules of comedy is that you never punch down, you always punch up. So if you're you make fun of people with more privilege than you do. So I certainly think that, you know, for non-disabled people to use humour about disability, it has to be done with extreme caution. So, but Stella was in that position where she could make fun of the kind of dumb stuff that non-disabled people would say to her, you know?
So, so tell us,
Understood.
Sarah,
Understood.
what did you make Stella most effective advocate, do you think?
What made her an effective? Well, she, you know, I mean, I've talked about her humour and her wit and intelligence, but she also had a massive platform, because in 2010 she was appointed as the editor of Ramp Up, which was on the ABC, the disability platform on the ABC. So she, as the editor of Ramp Up, she had enormous reach in the disability community. And then she worked her way through the ABC and really got herself positioned. So she was appearing on Q&A, she was appearing on radio, John Fane's Conversation Hour, lots of different ABC platforms and programs. Stella was there, and she was kind of, you know, not only talking about the needs and aspirations and inclusion of disabled people, but she was also just sharing her own life experience, which, you know, was a great example for people to start thinking about, you know, access and inclusion.
Yeah. So when it comes to the documentary you're working on, was there anything actually in particular that you've actually discovered or uncovered about Stella that was most interesting in the research you're doing on it, for the documentary at all?
Well, it's funny because I knew her really well for a really long time. So I met her in probably 2003, or maybe 2002, and she died in 2014. So that's kind of 12 years of friendship. And there wasn't so far there isn't too much that I've uncovered that I didn't know. I am really looking forward to spending a bit of time with the people that, so in the last sort of year to 18 months of her life, she was starting to become very famous, and she was spending a lot of time, you know, on the ABC and various media outlets. You know, she was doing stuff. She was busy all the time, and I didn't see a lot of her, you know, in the last year of her life, because she was just so busy. So I am quite looking forward to kind of just really drilling in and piecing it all together, piecing that kind of period of her life together in a more sort of detailed way.
Okay, that's great. I mean, can you recall an actual specific moment that actually highlights her sense of humor for us?
Oh, well, I mean, there's a piece in her Tales from the Crypt comedy show where she says, a woman that came up to her, I think, you know, on a train or somewhere, like randomly out in public, and said, "Excuse me, do you have a vagina?" And Stella was like nonplussed, and she looked and she said, "What do you mean, a spare one?" And she said, "No, but there does appear to be a giant asshole standing right in front of me." So, like, that was the kind of, you know, retort that,
Oh, that's good. That is good. Guys, any questions? Over to the floor again. Anything,
Yeah,
guys?
thank you for that, Cunningham.
Welcome.
Stella often came up with some great phrases and words. She also mentioned the word, I think it was inspiration porn.
yeah.
So can you give us some clarity around what she means by that?
Yeah. So Stella's TED Talk is called "I'm Not Your Inspiration, Thank You Very Much." And in fact, the documentary that we're making is going to be called "Stella, I'm Not Your Inspiration." And really, what Stella did in her TED Talk was she really kind of nailed that idea that, you know, you've got like those sort of memes where you've got a disabled kid in a walking frame, you know, running down, you know, running a race, and the caption says, you know, the only disability is a bad attitude, or, you know, that kind of thing. And really those images and those kind of things that are meant to inspire non-disabled people to kind of like, oh, what are you complaining about in your life? You know, your life could be this shit, you know. And so it's kind of incredibly insulting and incredibly degrading to be using images of disabled people to spur non-disabled people on to kind of, you know, feel better about their lives. It's like, it's really, it as especially as a non-disabled person myself, when you know it, it actually just feels really dirty. It's like, oh no, you can't, like, it's just, it's not good. It's really not good at all. But I think people don't question it, or they don't understand, or maybe they feel it's a bit wrong, but they don't quite know why. And so Stella really sort of explained, you know, how that really is a sort of gross insult to disabled people, and how it's really doesn't serve anyone well. So that's a very big theme in the documentary that we're going to be making, because it's really one of those things that you know, was important to Stella. And one of the things, I mean, I think part of the reason she came up with that idea was that she was asked to do the TED Talk, and I remember talking to her about the TED Talk, and she was like, I really don't want to do this TED Talk. Like, it's like, she's like, it feels a bit icky. It's all about me getting up there and inspiring. Everyone gets up on the stage and they're inspiring. And she's like, I don't like the feel of it. And also she had terrible anxiety, like the idea of talking to a full opera house and having to give a talk from memory is like terrifying. And I was like terrified for her. So there were a number of reasons why she didn't want to do it. So then I thought she was incredibly clever to turn it on its head and then to get on that stage. And she gets up and she says, you know, you're looking at me in this chair and you're probably kind of expecting me to inspire you. And so then she goes on to explain why that's really bad. So, you know, it's really, really very clever.
I'm sure we all go through that.
Yeah. And can I just add also, I was very happy to see that.
Is there any links?
Sorry, I was just waiting for the question.
Yeah, like Dave was going to ask you, like, was any links for the TED Talk that we can put up? There probably is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to watch the TED Talk, you can go onto the TED website and just it's just TED.com, and if you search up Stella Young, it will come up, or even just Google Stella Young TED Talk. It's everywhere. There's been more than 4 million views, so it's it's everywhere. And can the point that I was just going to make was, I was very happy to see that your podcast is called CripChat, because of course Stella loves the word Crip. You know, it was a big favourite of hers, and it wasn't always well received. Like, I think some people still had a reaction against the word. But she loved it. So I'm very happy to be speaking here on CripChat.
Excellent. Terrific. Well, thanks for that. It's very good. David,
thanks for joining us today. And if you ever want to come back and talk more about some other topics that got about disability, you're more than welcome.
We've got a few more questions yet, David. It's not quite done yet.
I'm happy to stay and answer more questions. Absolutely.
You got more questions?
Yeah, David.
I don't know. Well, I haven't got them on me.
I do, though. So Sarah, tell us just how the statue came about. What was the beginnings of that story?
That's a really interesting story. So I know that the Victorian government realised that there's a lot of statues around Victoria, and nearly all of them are of men, and then I think there's quite a few. There's quite a few statues of horses and dogs as well, and then beyond that, there's a very small handful of statues of women, and some of them are mermaids, and some of them are imaginary. And basically, the catalogue of statues around Victoria was appallingly not representing women. Now, as a woman, we all think like the idea of having a statue of us is a bit weird because it's a very man thing. But basically, the government decided that they were going to try and address this imbalance and put out a call for suggestions for which are the women that we should have statues of. So Stella was nominated by the Northern Grampians Shire. They put in an application to create a statue of Stella in her hometown of Stawell, and they were successful. And so they got Stella's family involved. They were very involved in the consulting with the sculptor. They had a local sculptor called Danny Fraser who did the sculpture. And then they wanted to create a really accessible experience when you go and visit the sculpture. So long story short, they hired me to create the kind of add-ons to the statue so that when people go and visit it, they can navigate around the space, whether they're in a wheelchair or for blind and vision impaired people. We wanted to create a space that was easy to orientate yourself around. And so I was like, I thought to myself, well, how am I going to do this? I don't know. I've never done this before. And they wanted to have a website too. They wanted to have all the information accessible on a website. And so basically I thought I'll just copy what somebody else has done. And then I found out that no one else had really done anything like this. So I had to kind of figure it out. So what we did was we added in 2 little speakers. There's a little speaker in the bottom near the statue, and there's a speaker just where there's a sort of plinth and a plaque that sort of tells you a little bit about Stella. And so the speakers, we've got a lovely blind woman called Lauren Hayes who did this gorgeous voiceover, and she tells you which way to walk and how to find the plaque. And she also tells you that there's a QR code on the plaque. And the QR code leads you to a website, and the website is incredibly accessible because Lauren made sure that every bit of screen reader and every bit of navigation is just incredibly accessible for people. And then we got an Auslan interpreter to do a lovely Auslan welcome on the website. So we just tried to create the most accessible experience. And then the website tells you all about Stella and has lots of lovely photos and videos and all kinds of stuff. And you don't have to be installed to access the website because it's just stellayoung.com.au. So anyone who can't get to stall and see the statue but wants to see the website can go and have a look at that website. And I put all the content together, and Lauren did an amazing job of making that accessible. And it's lovely. It's great.
That's
Sarah,
incredible.
Sarah, I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
I'm visually impaired. If I was to go there, would I be able? How big are those statues, and are we able to touch them?
Oh, yes. The statue is designed to be touched. And when we did the unveiling, the most lovely thing was that there were little children there, and all the children wanted to do was to climb up onto Stella's wheelchair, sit in her lap, give her a kiss, hug her, touch her hair. And I laugh because Stella hated anyone touching her hair, but she's okay in bronze. You can touch her hair. So you can feel, and there's a little joystick on her wheelchair. She's sitting in her wheelchair. You can feel it. You can interact with it. You can touch it. And also the voice that's there will tell you how to go and get to the plaque and get to the website and all the stuff that you need. So it's my intention that anyone who has any kind of impairment can go there and find it a really accessible and inclusive experience.
So Sarah, so when it came to the unveiling of the statue, what was your feeling on it, like, as to how you felt yourself?
The unveiling of the statue, did you say?
Yeah.
Look, it was such a wonderful kind of emotional experience to sort of see her just sitting there. I mean, it's bronze, and Stella was never bronze. She was always flesh and blood, but it's absolutely gorgeous. It reminds me of how sort of little she was, and how sort of present she was. Like it's actually really gorgeous to be there with her, and and you can touch it and explore it in a way that you couldn't do that with a real person. So I found it very, very moving. It was really just fantastic to see it come to life. Come to life. That's a bad pun, really, because she's not alive. The statue itself is glorious. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah. And also a great sentiment to work in her life as well. So when it comes to the statue's importance and significance to Australia, in our life as a country, Sarah, what would you say the actual their true things. So it's the importance of it when it comes to gender and disability equality.
Well, it's I
That's a long question to
just
ask, but anyway.
noticed a question jumped up too. The statue is in Stawell, which is a town in northwestern Victoria. It's probably just under 3 hours drive from Melbourne, and it's in a park, and it's right next to a lake, and it's a really, really beautiful setting. So it's really gorgeous spot to go and visit. And in terms of gender equality and disability equality, I mean, I did talk a little bit about the gender side of things, where the government really wanted to address that gender imbalance in civic statues, and so certainly having more statues of women is very important. But I think also the representation of disability is really, really vital. I mean, Stella had a very obvious, visible physical disability, so it immediately, a statue of her immediately speaks to that. But I think it also really places her legacy at it gives it significance. It tells society that a disabled woman can be valued, a disabled woman can be remembered. Her life was important, it was valid, it was valuable. She was a contributor, she was part of our society. So it really does say so much to society. And when you go and visit the statue, you not only see this statue of my beautiful friend Stella, but you also have this accessible experience. And even if 95% of the people who go there don't need that access, every single one of those people is learning about what good access is learning about how to be inclusive. So it's not only providing access, but it's demonstrating it as well. So I think it says a huge amount about the importance, the value, the contribution of disabled people. I think it's really, really important.
Absolutely, yeah. And especially when it comes to like public spaces too, right? I mean, it'd be
Absolutely. Taking up
for us
space,
here as well.
taking up public space, being present, being right there in the best spot in Stawell, next to the lake. It really says a lot about, how we value disabled people.
Yeah, exactly right. Guys, any questions? Are we there, guys?
I can see one taking of heads that knows that people are on board.
What is the most outstanding thing you have learned from knowing Stella Young?
Ooh, I mean, I do think what she said about inspiration porn is probably the biggest game changer, I mean, I loved, there were lots of things that she did with humor, and there were lots of times that I felt myself being not ticked off, because she didn't do that, but I would reflect on my thoughts and behavior and attitudes and things. Something she would say about, particularly about non-disabled people, she would say something and it would be like, oh, I need to look at myself and think to myself, can I do better here? So they were the things I learned from her. But I think for all of us, the idea around inspiration porn was just like a bit of a game changer.
Ibby?
Yeah, amazing. Look, Stella's always talk about normalizing disability. Just making it a norm.
Yeah.
How did people often perceive her when she used to live her everyday life pretty much?
Yeah. I mean, she was very visible. She used public transport all the time. She was like, people saw her, and her disability was very visible. So just by going out and, living her life, it was almost a political statement, because everyone noticed her wherever she went, And I mean, she would fly through town in her wheelchair, trying to avoid, having to have too many conversations with random strangers, because often they were pretty weird.
Something I do.
Yeah. It's just a thing that you do. But
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's
So,
good stuff.
Sarah, I mean, when it comes to like your life relationship you had with Stella, like, what's the thing that what's one thing that you actually like, and that actually has shaped your life when it comes to like that relationship you had with with Stella?
Look, I think she was a fantastic influence on my daughter, who, as I said, is coincidentally also called Stella. And she was a real mentor for her. Unfortunately, my Stella was only 15 when Stella Young died, but Stella was in our house all the time. Except for the last few months when she was insanely busy, I would probably have seen her, every month for either drinks or a dinner or, some sort of catch up. And I loved having her in my life. I mean, she was really good company, and she didn't spend her whole life talking disability stuff, but it was a big part of her life. And I feel like, in a way, I've kind of lost that sort of that gauge, that temperature gauge of like what's the latest issues, what's the fresh take on things. I really valued her kind of her view on all kinds of disability related matters.
Yeah. And so when it comes to a bit of advice you would give to like aspiring advocates in our disability community, what would you say to them?
Oh, look, don't get too disheartened by having to advocate for the same old things year after year after year, because that just seems to be the way that it is. You fix something and then something else needs fixing, and then you turn around and you go back and the thing you just fixed 2 years ago needs fixing again. So persistence, I think, and, enjoy the wins, but don't take them for granted, because there's always someone waiting to stuff them up again.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
So now that concludes our actual interview. But final thoughts on everyone. First, Sarah, your final thoughts, Sarah. What would you like to give the final thoughts for us today?
Look, we were very, very lucky to have Stella Young in our lives. She was just great company. She was one of a kind, and I still miss her after many, many years. It's 8.5 years since she died, but I really hope. I just don't want people to kind of forget her. So that's why I'm doing this film.
Terrific, fantastic. Ibby.
Yeah, look, Stella Young was amazing. The talks that she gave were, I guess, it motivated me, as well as I know a few people it's motivated to become, leaders within their own communities. And I encourage everyone to, yep.
Oh, I was just going to say, if people do want, I mean, obviously you can look at her TED Talk easily. It's out there. If people want to see a little bit more of Stella from the No Limits days, I've got a website that people can subscribe to called disabilitybusters.com, and that's got like heaps and heaps of disability content on it. And the early seasons of No Limits, Stella's in lots of those episodes. So if you really want to kind of dive in and kind of, do a deep dive on Stella, that's a great place to start. It's a very, very inexpensive subscription if you want to get into it.
Okay.
That's awesome. But yeah, look, I guess it helps us to motivate. It motivates us to become true leaders within our communities. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I really admire Stella Young, and I respect her. And awesome. Thank you for that,
Yep.
Stella. Unbelievable.
David, your final thought. David, your final thought.
Oh, where's that? David?
My final thoughts.
There he is.
Stella Young.
There's a question on the screen, or a comment on the screen, about her using the word disabled as well. I think that was something that she was very unashamed of. It was very important to talk about it.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, we need to always reclaim our language, I think.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the final words, I reckon, never be ashamed to be with a disability, because not everyone has no disability. 1 in 5 is claimed to be disabled.
Indeed.
but
Yep, exactly right.
be proud of your abilities.
Yeah. And yeah, we just have to
Don't
always
concentrate on
overcome
your
that.
disability. Be proud of your abilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, my final thought is this: is that I actually respect greatly her work and her life, and also her legacy. And I basically strive to actually become, similar to her level. We have a great role model to actually reach to, like within Stella. And I think it's probably keep her memory and her work alive through our persistent and consistent efforts like to improve our lot in Australia and make sure we actually never back down from a good advocacy brawl, which is always a very important thing to do in Australia. Otherwise, we all lose out. So look, thank you, Sarah, for joining us. It's been great having you on CripChat Australia. And guys, remember to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll be back next week with another great episode of CripChat Australia. Thanks, guys.
All the best, guys. Thanks very much for having me on the show.
Terrific.